hate to be the one to say this, but some doors are cheap for a reason. 60 people sat in that auction room. 60. Not one of them raised a hand when that house came up. They just looked down, shifted in their seats, looked somewhere else. I didn't know why. I raised my hand anyway, and 3 weeks later, I'm standing inside a hidden room that wasn't on any blueprint, flashlight shaking in my hand, staring at $7 million in cash stacked against the wall, like someone was coming back for it. Next to the money, one sealed envelope, one page inside, one word, written by hand, in the center of the page. Run. That's when I realized those 60 people knew something I didn't. And whoever hid that money already knew I was standing there. My name is Marcus, small county outside San Antonio, Texas. I ran a repair business, appliances, basic contracting, whatever needed fixing, nothing glamorous. Most months I cleared just enough to cover rent and groceries, and not always in that order. A few years before this, my brothers had forced me out of our family home after our parents died. They moved fast. Paperwork I didn't fully read. Signatures I gave because I trusted them. When it was done, they had the house, the property, and everything inside it. I had a 2-bedroom apartment and a family I had to explain it to. That was the bottom. So when my friend Daniel, we grew up together, straightest guy I know, came by the shop and said the county was running a property auction, I almost didn't go. Cheap houses don't exist anymore, Daniel. He just grinned. You'd be surprised. I showed up the next morning with $1,100 and no real plan. I was there to watch. The first 5 properties sold in under 20 minutes. All of them went for more than I had. One went for $60,000 before the auctioneer finished his sentence. Then the listing came up for the old 2-story house on the east edge of town. Starting bid $900, and the room went quiet in a way I hadn't heard all morning. Not the kind of quiet that means people are deciding, the kind that means the decision was already made before anyone walked in. The auctioneer didn't linger on it. He moved through the listing like a man who wanted to be done with it. $900. Any bidders? I scanned the room. 60 people. Easy. Contractors. Investors. A few first-timers like me. Nobody moved. I raised my hand. The room didn't just stay quiet. It changed. A few heads turned. One woman near the front leaned over and whispered something to the man beside her. $900 going once. $900 going twice. Sold. As I walked to the table to sign, an older man near the back caught my eye. Gray beard, work jacket, the kind of face that doesn't waste expressions. He shook his head once and looked away. Not like I'd beaten him to something. Like I'd stepped into something. I drove out to see it that afternoon. Broken windows, porch boards so rotten you could push your boot straight through. Paint coming off in strips the size of your arm. My wife drove out separately. She stood at the end of the driveway and looked at it for a long time without saying anything. Marcus, are you sure? No, I said, but it's ours. Before I tell you what was behind that wall, I need you to understand something. What I found didn't just change my finances. It reached all the way back to the brothers who threw me out, and the life I thought I'd lost for good. If this story is landing for you, share it with someone who needs it right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. Because this is the kind of story that doesn't get told on the loud. Every evening after work I drove out and put in 2-3 hours demo first. You can't build anything back until you've cleared out what's broken. 3 weeks in, I was pulling drywall in the upstairs bedroom. Standard work hammer, pull, toss. Then my hammer went through, and the sound was wrong. Not the flat thud of insulation and wood. Something hollow. The sound a wall makes when there's nothing behind it. I knocked again. Same thing. I cut a 2-foot section out and shone my flashlight through. Air, just air. A space roughly the size of a walk. In closet. Not on any layout. Not connected to any vent or pipe. Sealed from the outside with drywall, like it had been swallowed by the house on purpose. I squeezed through. Dust so thick it moved like fog. No windows. No light source. 4 walls and whatever had been left behind. Against the far wall, 4 large metal storage boxes. The kind built for long-term storage, heavy gauge steel, commercial locks, the kind of boxes you'd use if you needed something to last 20 years undisturbed. Beside them, sitting on top of the stack, a single yellow envelope, sealed, placed there like a message. I used a crowbar on the first box, cash bundled in tight stacks. The kind banks use, rubber bands still holding. Second box, same. Third, same. Fourth, same. I sat back against the wall and did rough math in my head. Each bundle was thick. There were hundreds of them. A financial examiner later put the total at just under $7 million, enough to buy roughly 40 average homes in that county, stacked in 4 metal boxes in a room that didn't exist on paper. But I couldn't stop looking at that envelope. I broke the seal. One page inside, one word written by hand in the center. Run. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, a black SUV was parked across the street from the house. Dark windows, engine off. Just sitting there. It was there when I arrived. It was there when I left. Day 2. Same spot, same vehicle. On day 3, my neighbor 2 doors down flagged me over. Someone had been going house to house asking questions, asking about the new owner of the abandoned place on the corner, asking how long he'd been working on it, asking whether he'd found anything inside. That's when I knew the money hadn't been forgotten. Someone had been waiting. I called an attorney that evening and told him everything. He came to the house. We went through the second panel I'd found near the floor, a shallow compartment behind a baseboard that held old photographs, property records, deeds, and a stack of newspaper clippings bound with a clip. The clippings were from 20 years back, local San Antonio coverage. A real estate developer named Richard Walker had vanished in the early 2000s. State investigators believed he had defrauded at least a dozen business partners, contractors, small investors, a few family-owned firms, out of somewhere between $5 and $9 million before disappearing completely. No arrest, no trial. The money never surfaced. The case went cold and stayed cold, until a man with $1,100 and nothing to lose bought his house at a county auction for $900 and put a hammer through the wrong wall. My attorney contacted the FBI field office the same week. What followed was 8 months of federal investigation. Agents walked through that house more times than I could count. Every dollar was traced, every document authenticated. The fraud victims, most of them now in their 60s and 70s, a few represented by their adult children, received the recovered funds through a federal restitution process. I didn't keep a single dollar of the $7 million, but I also didn't walk away with nothing. Because I'd cooperated fully, reported immediately, and provided evidence that cracked a case that had been sitting in a cold file for 2 decades. I was entitled to a legal whistleblower and asset recovery reward. The exact amount is something I keep private. But here's what it was enough for. It was enough for a down payment on a real house. 4 bedrooms. A backyard big enough for my kids to actually use. A neighborhood with sidewalks and neighbors who wave back. My wife and I went through 4 or 5 listings before we found it. Right price, right size, right area of town. We were 3 days from closing when I drove by the property again, just to look at it, the way you do when something finally feels real. That's when I noticed the house next door, large lot, well-maintained, mature trees in front. A truck in the driveway I recognized immediately. My brothers owned it. The same 2 men who had taken my parents home through paperwork I was too trusting to read. The same men who watched me leave with nothing and never once picked up the phone. I didn't change my offer. I closed on schedule. I moved in on a Saturday morning. They were both on the porch when the moving truck came down the street. I felt them watching as my kids ran up the front path, as my wife handed me a box through the side door, as we turned a house into something that was ours. I didn't wave, didn't say a word, just kept working. My wife found me in the kitchen later that afternoon, after the truck was gone and the kids were already arguing over bedrooms. She put her hand on my arm. "Do you feel it?" I did, not anger. Not the thing I thought I'd feel if this day ever came. Something quieter, something that didn't need a name. Every morning I back out of that driveway. I go to work. I come home to my family. My brothers see it happen. We don't speak. We probably never will. Here's what I've come to understand. That house nobody bid on. It wasn't cursed. It wasn't haunted. It was just waiting for someone who had no other option but to take a chance on something everyone else had already decided wasn't worth it. That hidden room didn't make me rich. It made me visible again. It gave me a story I couldn't have written on purpose. The man who hid that money thought he was building a safety net. He was actually building a door, and the door was waiting for me. Sometimes the people who count you out are doing you the longest favor of your life, not because they're secretly kind, because they force you into rooms they never bothered to look inside. My brothers threw me out and thought that was the end of it. It was, just not in the way they expected.